Hi, everyone. Good to see all of you. Okay. When we talk about the future of mobility, there are many angles of it, of course. One of the most important part, one of the most interesting changes is going to take place in the automotive industry. And for that reason, we collect together a couple of interesting speakers that will discuss the future of the automotives vis-a-vis all the changes that we see in the world of autonomous and shared, and etc. So please welcome our guests, our panel's speaker. From DD, we have Dr. Chang Senior Vice President and Chairman of Engineering and Technology Committee. Please come on stage. From Toyota AI, we have Jim Adler, the Managing Director and Board Member of Toyota AI Ventures. Next, one of our own, Eran Sendos, Vice President of Autonomous Driving at Delphi, although it says here something else. It changed. And last but not least, Mark Joseph, Global Chief Development Officer at Transdev, used to be Veolia in the past. Okay, I think we'll start with what we have, and the rest will follow.
More for us.
Okay. Eran, since you are the expert on the autonomous driving, why don't you tell us in the crowd when we're going to see autonomous cars on the streets?
Yeah, so I think like a true Israeli, I'm going to start with asking you a question.
Okay.
So when do you think we're going to see the first ones?
I think probably 10 years.
Okay, so let me now then correct you. Okay, so at Delphi, we build autonomous vehicles. We work together with OEMs. We work with mobility providers. And what we actually see is that the market is bifurcated. There isn't actually one simple answer of the starting point. We're going to see different phases in the market. The first ones, which we've announced and we're working towards with some of our partners in the mobility space, is going to start in 2019. So if you think about commercial transport, people that are around, moving people more in a mass scale, like Transdev, for example. Okay, when Mark will join us, that's what they do. From their perspective, the key value proposition is really to get the driver out of the loop, okay, to get the service itself more affordable, and by that extend the services to multiple areas. So the motivation is very high, and those kind of services, you're not going to see them. I think you're kind of right in terms of the expectation. You're not going to see a solution that will take you from anywhere to anywhere immediately, but you will see shuttles, simple things, shuttles, certain areas, certain routes that are easy to automate. This is where we're going to start. And the first starting point for that is going to be 2019. And people think it's kind of very far away and far-fetched, but I don't think so. I mean, you take a look today, you have autonomous driving for mining, and there's other equipments that have been automated. It's just a question of really doing it safely for population. So if we do it for a specific route, if we do it at the right speed and in areas that we can control, the starting point is not very far away, and we're working towards that. Of course, the main question I think that people are really thinking about when we're going to see autonomous driving is when we're going to see, as a consumer, when are we going to be able to buy a vehicle, okay, that's going to be autonomous? That's really the main question people think about. And that one, of course, we're working with OEMs across the globe. Autonomous driving is a huge trend for everyone, and very important for them to be part of it. Most people are really talking about 2021. Okay, but over there the focus is a little different. Okay, it's really focused on a highly autonomous situation, okay, or level 3, which means that the driver is still going to be engaged if he needs to. Okay, and the main focus there is really to get a situation that you can go on a highway and you can drive and you can take your hands off and you can go to something else.
So you're saying that the rollout will be closed areas first, which is obvious. But do you see, Jim, this is for you, do you see actually drivers alongside autonomous vehicles, or it's going to have to be restricted area, stuff like that?
Yeah, so the way I always answer this question, autonomy will come.
I will pause you for a second. Our guest is, from DD, just join us.
Welcome.
Please take the mic. Go ahead.
I always answer this question, it will come sooner than you think, but not everywhere you would like, which is pretty much taking off of Eran's point. We think when you think personally owned vehicle, that may be quite a ways away because that's going to have to handle every situation, all weather conditions, road conditions. That's a very tough problem filled with corner cases. I think the more near-term reality will be per trip. So it may be that the gentle slope will be L4. Your ride-hailing vehicle will show up without a driver because the roads will be good, there'll be no construction, the weather will be good, and so it'll be quite within the safe envelope of the autonomy. And so you may see, as soon as 2020, 2021, 2022, you'll see a small percentage of routes be autonomous. And then over time, you'll see 5, 7, 10%, 15%, and then you'll have this nice gentle slope. In 10 years, we'll wake up and our ride-hailing vehicle will come most of the time without a driver. And of course, there's a huge business model that's driving that. One, which is a business model around mobility as a service, which will allow vehicles to have more expensive sensor packages because the duty cycle is much longer on these vehicles. They're being driven 8 hours a day, so they can afford a sensor package that's more expensive. They also can be a little uglier. These sensor packages so far are pretty ugly, but no more uglier than the taxi, the roof of a taxi. So I think there's much more flexibility and allowance for mobility, autonomous mobility around these ride-hailing services, and that will be how we will get. Of course, industrial environments will be leading edge, but I think for the public, it will be ride-hailing.
Dr. Chang, I'm happy to hear your thought about how you're going to roll out autonomous vehicles into your services.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my name is Wenshou. Sorry, I'm late. Yeah. I'm from Didi, China. Didi is a ride-sharing company in China. Also, we are expanding our services to global market. On ride-sharing platform in China, our platform provides 25 million trips a day. Yeah, so yeah, there's a big market in China, so we are lucky to have such a big market. Yeah, for ride-sharing, yeah, in the future we see, yeah, there will be autonomous vehicles on ride-sharing platform because, yeah, autonomous vehicle, self-driving car will be more safe, and ride-sharing platform is a good place to commercialize self-driving cars. Yeah, since on our platform, we can help self-driving car feed with more rides, like provide more than 40 trips a day for the self-driving cars. So yeah, we believe self-driving car has a bright future. Yeah, okay. And we also spend the efforts in developing self-driving car technologies.
Okay. Mark, the lagger.
We did
start early.
Since we already started to discuss autonomous and where we expect this autonomous to roll out to the market. You as an operator, are you also dealing with the regulators, with the cities about the potential effect of autonomous? Because we know that it can turn out into a mess. Just the fact that the cost will be so cheap, cost per mile come down 80% or so. So nobody wants to use train or bus anymore because they can use autonomous car, right? So how do you see it? How cities will address?
So first, thank you for having me, and sorry to be late. From TransDev perspective, we are working first with SAFE, the organization SAFE, and working at a national level to try to understand what kind of regulations will facilitate the quick deployment of this. We're already working with regulators locally because we're operating autonomous vehicles now, mostly on closed campus. We're transporting about 4,000 people a day. We're doing it on EDF's nuclear facility in France, so we're already gaining some experience. And we see some limited geofenced areas with local regulations, so they're state regulations in the state, in the U.S. primarily, we're seeing state regulations facilitating the deployment, and then local regulations as to where we can operate, and we're working on that. The one last comment that I would make is, I think the great irony is that from the disruption standpoint, from the rideshare companies, we've seen a lack of interest in regulation. But once we see your point, where there's real adoption of many autonomous vehicles, then the rideshare companies are going to say to the regulators, come in, we need limited numbers of licenses like cellular, I think.
So what you're saying is that the moment cities, they're not interesting to regulate it. They just want to wait and see what's happening?
They're trying to learn, to learn and see demonstrations right now. And each one is looking to the other. I think some cities like Columbus might be further ahead with some kind of a plan for a more broad adoption. But we see in Tampa, Florida, for instance, a very, very limited area where they're really ready to try it and say, let's make the...
Eran, you have a comment on the regulator side?
Yeah, maybe I can add to that. Today we operate actually in like 3 different continents already, okay, doing trials. And as Mark said, I think the trial phase is extremely important, right? First of all, we learn in terms of user behavior and consumers and consumer acceptance, but it's also an important test bed for the regulators themselves. Okay, they get to see, they collect data, they get to see the performance, they get to understand the safety. It helps them really visualize and think about how they can, how they can create the regulations around the safety as well, which just don't exist today. And some places are more eager than others. In general, I would say that there is a very strong desire, okay, for them to be ahead of the game. Many of them understand that this will create, substantial economic reward, right, if they can enable it. So I would say we're getting very good collaboration. I think we're getting very little pushback. Of course, there's a concern for public safety, but a lot of them are more eager to figure out how they can move faster. And some areas are easier than others. Like, for example, today we operate in Singapore. Singapore is a city, it's a state. It's actually operating almost like a business. It's impressive to see how they act, and they have a sense of urgency. I mean, they really want to get it done. And it's done to the point that, in certain areas of the city, they suspended regulation. Okay? I mean, they allow us to go and experiment, within certain confounds. We see the same things even in Europe. In the Netherlands, they opened up one specific section of the highway that people can drive with autonomous vehicles because they want to see the use cases, and everything is getting filmed and recorded. And of course, we have to do it in a certain way that's responsible. And in the US, of course, we operate in multiple cities as well. The US just passed a legislation around, I think, a month ago, which was very important. Up until that point, we had to deal with every single state separately. Each one of them had their own regulations, their own way of doing stuff. We had to get people trained. We had to get the car license every time we moved it from one state to the other. It was very painful. But now the federal government, passed a regulation that is now, going to be applying across the country, and that's going to help accelerate it. So I don't mean to kind of say that it's all done, okay? But we're seeing, I think, promising movement, and especially if we think about the deployment that's going to start first local and then start to scale, we do see the regulators working hand in hand together with us to complement and to figure out how to make it work.
Just one point on the regulation. I mean, we are seeing incredible amount of momentum, certainly at the local level, but on this House bill, 3388 that just passed, it passed the US House by a voice vote. The House can't pass table salt with a voice vote. and so it sailed through, unanimous through committee, passed the House through a voice vote, still has to get through the Senate. But you can see the amazing amount of momentum around this regulation. I think because all of us don't want to see a mosaic of fragmented regional regulations. We'd like to have one set of regulations that we could shoot for around certainly prototyping and cybersecurity and safety and privacy and all the issues that we know will impact this industry. So it's great to see some federal leadership. We're certainly seeing it in Singapore and around the world, but to see it in the US is really encouraging, and it shows the amount of interest in what everyone in this room is really focusing on.
Thank you. Mr. Chang, I want to move back to the service side. Do you see, currently we see taxis running around the cities, there's a shared service, etc. What kind of future services do you see in terms of the new mobility service that you envision?
Well, in China, DD platform provide a set of services. Like we have a platform for taxi service, platform for DD Express car and DD Premium cars and DD Luxury car. Also, we provide a hitch service and a chauffeur service, designated drivers. And also, we provide a rental car service. And also, we have a bus service, a real-time bus arrival time, and also public transit. And this is a lot of transportation tools. Yeah, we are going to build a platform which have a multiple model transit solution. Like we call the mobility as a service. Yeah, when a user enter a destination, yeah, the platform will suggest to the end user which transit is fit his or her interest. Like take public transit to airport, or take a DD Express car to a subway station, then take a subway to the airport. Yeah, we are going to develop a new mobility as a service solutions, which will include all kinds of transportation tools. Yeah.
Thank you. Mark, do you see yourself actually invite some type of vehicles in the future, develop the type of vehicles that you think will be, I don't know, fit for your service or whatever, not just using the current, out-of-the-shelf type products?
I think the mass market AV will be a sort of standardized or utility model, but I also think there will be probably some bespoke vehicles for individuals that are special built, and I think there are some examples like healthcare, special transportation for people with disabilities, services. We have wheelchair accessible vehicles now. I think we're going to see a very good use case around healthcare and autonomous vehicles, and I think those vehicles will be customized.
No, there's a startup here in Israel that actually started to develop the pod, basically saying, okay, the pod could be very different. It could be a coffee shop, it could be office, it could be, I don't know, you want to go to sleep. Is this something that you also think about in the future?
We've seen, you're talking about some over-the-road vehicles there's already a startup cabin in the West Coast inner city luxury bus, hotel on wheels.
Yeah.
I can see an early adoption that could be ramp to ramp, not only for trucking, but for long distance bus, and you could see vehicles that would be outfitted accordingly. I can also see examples, for instance, for school transportation, for school kids, where there could be specialized vehicles along those lines.
And Didi, you also decided, you also in building a new concept? Building new vehicles?
Yeah, actually in China, Didi provide Didi premium car service for kids. Yeah, the kids can, we send a car and the driver to pick up kids, send it to school, or pick up kids from the school, then send it to home without the parents carrying, at the side of kids. Just, we specially choose, we check the background of drivers, and probably, only 100th percentage of driver fits in our category. Then we let them to drive for the kids. Yes.
Eran, I wonder what you thought about. It seems like there's a shift in the value chain of the automotive altogether. Where do you see where will be the most, I would say, important part?
Yeah, so I would say that I think everyone in the value chain, if you ask them that question, they will say the most important part is one level above what they do. So, that's just by evidence. You take a look empirically. I think the OEMs are trying to get into services. You take a look at the tier one like us, we're not trying to be an OEM to build a vehicle, but we're building larger systems. Everyone is kind of trying to do something else. And the key point behind it really is that there's this disruption, right? You take a look at autonomous driving and electrification and connected. It creates trends that, basically the automotive industry, by and large, have not really changed. 30, 40 years, everyone is kind of doing the same stuff. But now all this innovation is coming in, and everyone is asking themselves, like, what does that mean for me? Like, what does that do to my company? And it creates, I would say, tremendous risks and tremendous opportunities, and everyone understands that, right? If you are not playing in the right game, maybe 10 or 20 years from now, you're not going to be around. Probably more 10 than 20. So everyone is asking the question that you're asking. I think the value chain is going to get reshaped. Mobility as we think about it today, people go to a dealership, they buy a car, and that's what we think, transportation is today, right? Or we go on the bus. But the reality is that we use our car only 4% of the time. I mean, if you think about it economically, it makes no sense that we spend that amount of money to put something in our garage for 96% of the time. So the future is really going to be mobility on demand, okay? Similar to the sharing economy that we see in Airbnb and of course Uber and Lyft and all these guys and Didi, right, that are doing that. And what that means is that a lot of the value is going to go in that direction, right? So first of all, it means that fleets are going to play a very big role. Understanding the economics of how you move people around, being ready for moving the people around, all of that is, again, kind of new disciplines that exist today. But even Uber, Lyft, and again, maybe you can correct me, and Didi, I think all the statistics that I've heard is that all these companies together are only attacking 5% of transportation. So there's a lot more to go. And, public transport is also going to look completely different. Buses today, on average, they go with only 30% occupancy. Right, so that doesn't make sense, right? So that's going to change. You asked earlier about the size of the vehicle. That means that we're having inefficiency, right? If you have a very large vehicle and it's only partially occupied. With all of this in mind, and everyone is asking, okay, what is it that I should do to prepare myself moving forward? It means that you can already start to redesign the future transportation system, right? Vehicles are going to become probably smaller. We'll have pods. We may have a network that's going to be, you're not getting just picked up and dropped off anywhere. It may be a connected. Like in Singapore, what we do is we do actually an experiment that we pick people from their home and we bring them to the train station. Okay, and the future transportation some of it may look like that, right? It's all going to be feeder networks.
Actually, we have this pilot in Israel as well. They call it taxi.
Kav Chamesh, yeah.
No, it's actually working.
Yeah.
Jim,
Yeah.
so you're in the middle of the storm. Yes. You got the Didis of the world. They have all the power because they have the customers. So how are you going to address it?
Yeah, so I think that, as Eran, you alluded to, I think in 10 years, OEMs are either going to be service companies or energy companies. And I think most of us will be service companies. And yes, the value chain is getting reshaped. And to be a service company, you have to be more, I would argue, data native. And so in many respects, there was a question that was asked of Netflix when they started to create their own content. And they asked, why is Netflix is a delivery service, why are you creating content? And Netflix answered, Netflix has to become HBO, or the content delivery system, before HBO becomes Netflix. And I think similarly, the OEMs have to become high-tech before high-tech and become OEMs. And so the insurgence of the Intels and Waymos and Teslas and Apples of the world are putting pressure on the automotive industry generally to become more data native, to become more software savvy. Software, as Mike Andreessen famously said, software is eating the world, and now the auto industry is on the menu, and we need to step up. And I'm not an auto guy. I'm a data analytics entrepreneur. We sold our last company to Microsoft, and when I joined Toyota about a year and a half ago, I was hired to run the data cloud team. And I said, well, Toyota, you must have tons of data. And they said, oh, data? What data? We don't have data. I said, come on. There must be data here somewhere. And it took me about 3 months to find it, but there were, tons of petabytes of data in a bunker under Nagoya. And sure enough, there was field test data that's been collected for decades. Great, amazing training data that was really not thought of as crucial to the business. It was used to test vehicles, but now data is being used to forge vehicles, to create the product, to train the autonomy. And that is a very data native activity that the OEMs, I don't think, necessarily natively think about. And I think they're going through that change. And over the next several years, they will make that change. And with it, our value chain will change quite a bit. And that's why you see us investing in companies and looking at artificial intelligence and all the supporting technologies that are really going to shape new business models and bring new technologies to the marketplace that no one could have dreamed of even 5 years ago.
So the researchers show that, all this sharing business will actually potentially cut, 80% of the amount of vehicles that you need on the streets. So how the automakers are going to make money? They're going to lose their brand value because nobody cares what kind of type of taxi it drives, right? They're going to lose the size, but the volume if will come down at some point. So how the automakers will make money?
Well, I think there's going to be a value chain change, there's in this whole value chain. So there may be less vehicles sold, that's debatable, but assuming you're right, the utilization will go up. Now vehicles last 10, 15 years, but they're only used 4% of the time. If they're used 40% of the time, the life cycle will shorten. And you may sell 20% less vehicles that may be on the road, but you may sell them every few years and to replenish that fleet. So it's really unclear how the manufacturing volume will change over time. There will be a value shift to fleets, to supporting technologies, software, services, but you're still going to want to know that you're safe and your ride will be comfortable, and there'll be room to differentiate within that.
Ron, what about the brand value? Are we still going to see the brand value? People buy cars because of their brand, for the most part.
Well, I think the brand may be different. Like the meaning of the brand will probably change. I mean, all these companies are looking to evolve, and they are. If you think about where it is they're going to make money, today it's really a unit economics, right? It's about selling vehicles, and that's the sell. I think in the future it's going to be like an Airbnb or like Uber or Lyft. Right? It's going to be a usage-based economics. So that's going to be the baseline, exactly, as Jim said. But there's also going to be new opportunities, right, which just don't exist today. With higher utilization, those vehicles are going to be more sophisticated. They have more sensors around them. The value of the data that they collect, that's massively important, okay? And there's going to be a whole bunch of dollars that could be extracted from that. And then the other piece, again, we don't talk enough about is, the vehicle is really the last point of unreclaimed time, right? If you think about it, we're in the vehicles. There's now all this time that's going to be opened up for people to use. Well, that's also a huge monetary value. Think about all the content that's going to come in. So there's a big piece here for the OEMs that they could play a role, right, in this shift from, okay, just selling us something with a steering wheel to, it's the equivalent of moving from a feature phone to a smartphone, right? You take a look at the value that got created, it was massive. But it requires some courage, it requires investments, it's a different way of thinking, it requires marriage between, automotive companies and technology companies, in Silicon Valley or in Israel, or, just thinking completely differently on how you're going to approach it.
Mark?
Just
go ahead.
I don't underestimate the ability of the auto manufacturers to find the new area of opportunity, but what is potentially more worrying even than the reduction of car sales is with the increasing adoption of electric vehicles. Long before we see full autonomy and deployment of autonomous vehicles, we're going to see a shrinking of maintenance. The maintenance costs are going to go way down, the maintenance time is going to go way down, and that's a big revenue source for the dealers, and that's a concern, I think.
Yes, I agree with Jim. Yeah, data is very important for mobility service, also for the industrial. On DD platform, since there is a huge platform, the number of drivers making money on our platform last year, 2016, is 17.5 million. So we have a huge demand of cars. So we are working with electrical car makers in China. We know the cost of electrical car is pretty high than gas-based cars. Yeah, the cost is high, but when the X is distance. If we run a more distance, the cost will increase, but the slope is lower. But if the gas-based cars, from the distance zero, the cost is lower. But if we run more distance, the cost will increase rapidly. And the slope is higher, then there is an intersection. we calculated the cost base. The intersection is 200,000 kilometers. So for the private cars, there almost no family use run more than 200,000 kilometers. But for the cars on our ride-sharing platform, our cars run for 10 hours a day, then we can just need less than 2 years to run more than 200,000 kilometers. So that's a reason we have a high demand of electric cars in China. And our company make a plan. We are going to have 1 million electric cars, new energy cars, in DD platform in 2020. Yeah, and also we are working with the car maker company how to customize the car to lower the cost. Like we don't need fancy audio equipment on the ride-sharing cars. We reduce these equipments. Also, we work with the car maker how to maintain the life cycle of electrical cars. We're monitoring the battery, we connect the data, and how to reduce the maintenance cost. So this is to reduce the cost, and also to reduce the cost for people to use the ride-sharing services. So that's the core is data. We connect more data and to customize the cars.
Do you work also with the, telcos or any other companies who actually deal with data, or you collect everything and do everything on your own?
Well, we connect the data our own. The driver and the passenger use a cell phone. Also, we install a dash cam on the car. Yeah, we connect.
So you collect all of it and do all of it on your own, basically.
Yeah, on our own, basically.
Jim, there's a lot of discussions about the entrance of the big giants, the Apple, the Google, whatever. Do you see first competition, JVs? How do you see it? How the technology? Because obviously there's a strength here and strength there.
Yeah, I mean, everyone likes to predict the demise of the market leaders, the OEMs. I think that's a little premature. 40%, typically last year, 40% of ride-sharing, ride-hailing cars in the United States are Toyotas. Why? Because they're efficient, they're reliable, they're durable, they're safe. And so that's a platform that provides market share, which is a place to collect data, which will create an opportunity for joint ventures and opportunities to monetize that data. And we're going to see quite a bit of that. And it's easy to underestimate that, but if you look at other industries that are insurgents into this, into automotive, like Google and Apple and others, they know what to do with data. I mean, if you look at the best example I like is the creation of the spell checker. On a rule-based system, it took Microsoft about 20 years to really hone a spell checker. It took Google too, because they had the "did you mean" feature, and they were able to correlate mistyped search queries with what people really meant. So with data, they were able to knock an order of magnitude off what they were able to do. And I think on mapping and services to customers, that market share that the OEMs enjoy right now are going to be a great place to leverage new services.
So do you see collaboration with all the Googles of the world?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you see work together on data, etc. Because, for example, take Verizon. Okay, they just spend $1 billion on several companies, right? Mm-hmm. Because they want the access. Mm-hmm. But you said, I'm the OEM, I will have the access. So
well, look, I think it's always a little bit of co-opetition, right? And so it's always a function of market share, compute, storage, and network. And operators and OEMs that need to work together to offer the best solutions to the customer. And at the end of the day, the customer rules, and the industry will shape the value chain to service the customer. And it's up to all of us to figure out where we want to be in that value chain to maximize our value. And you're seeing that happen right now, which is why this is such a vibrant place to be.
Ron?
Same question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you think about these new players, we spoke earlier about the different phases that are going to happen to the industry. First of all, reshaping the vehicle and then kind of dealing with the insides. I think the companies you mentioned, like Apple, Google, obviously they have a very big advantage when it comes to the inside of the vehicle, right? Understanding the consumer, the content, how that goes. And I'm pretty sure they're going to be, up and ready, okay, when that time comes. And this is really, a lot of what they're targeting is really for that at the end of the day. Actually making a vehicle is a completely different art, okay? And there's what goes into this as well is probably, I don't know, hundreds of thousands and I don't know how many thousands of man-years that went into perfecting what it means to build a safe vehicle. And, when I think about myself, I'd rather put my kid in a vehicle that was built by, by an automotive OEM that have gone through all of that and has that paranoia built in than something that was a new entrant. And I think that's part of probably some of the barriers that, the new technology companies have to go through. They have to establish a consumer brand if they're going to get into the vehicle space. And they have to be comfortable with taking the liabilities that's associated with it. There's a lot of other stuff that comes along with building a car. So I think, as Jim said, everyone is kind of trying to encroach in the other space to figure out where they fit best, to make sure that they're, eventually things fit into their funnel. But I think the industry is going to settle in the right vectors, at the end of the day.
Mark, data, again, and free time, and I don't know, media and retail. Do you deal with all of that in your services?
Yeah, still there's a lot of fragmentation on the data. We have data on where the vehicles are. We have open data for bus systems. So you've seen a number of apps that have been developed, like Move It or other apps to look at where buses are. But we think now there's a lot of possibilities. You talked about mass. We think there's a lot of possibilities to connect the data between where the vehicle is, how to connect the passenger, and then know all the information in terms of passenger preferences, and then offer tailored services in the future on that data. So the ultimate change could be for mobility as a service is offer subscription services with a monthly fee and use the data for what type of services do you like. And just one comment on what they said that I think is an interesting one. I was talking to Ron about this yesterday. That might be instructive for auto, in the US we say cash is king. Amazon bought Whole Foods recently. Amazon paid, I think, $13 billion for Whole Foods, which seemed like a lot of money, except when you look at the market cap of Amazon at $549 billion. So it was pocket change for them. I think where this cash is, there are going to be opportunities to solve some of these problems for the players who have a lot of cash. And some of these guys have a lot of cash.
Yeah, but the giants also, the tech companies, they can buy half of the industry, it still leaves some spare change. So, money is...
But I would argue that it is also cultural, and this is kind of what Iran was alluding to, that it takes a certain cultural orientation to build a safe car. And data, just like it's difficult for OEMs to become data native, it's hard for data companies to be automotive native and understand the difficulties of building hardware. Their number one job is keep people safe. It's been that expertise and culture has built up over almost 100 years, 100 years in some cases. And so that's hard to do. And you're not just going to buy your way in. But to Mark's point, there are going to be opportunities to use some cash, But
I think there are a lot of sellers here, if you like.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. Right? It's amazing how many friends $100 million will buy. But I do think that there's some things you can do with resources, and other things that are just going to take time to build those cultural values into your organization.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, since there is a value chain, every player will find their positions. Like Didi is good at consumer-based services. Yeah, we are good at data and technology. That's it. We are not working on the hardware. So that's the reason our platform is open to car makers. We have a good partnership with car makers in China. And also our platform is welcome to, open to all kinds of self-driving cars. Yeah.
Yeah, just Eyal, maybe just one point on data, since you mentioned on that. I want to touch on this. Data, as we said earlier, has a lot of value. I think the main issue that we see from our side, from Delphi, kind of looking below at the vehicle, is that a lot of the data is kind of pent up. It's locked inside the vehicle. So if you open up a vehicle and you take a look at the cross-section, there's maybe like 150 different subcomponents. All of them have been created individually, right, in the car. And at the end, the OEMs integrate them. And all of those different pieces have, information in them, okay, that is locked. All of them have to be updated. In the future, the car is going to be like a software platform that you update. And one of the things that we're seeing and we're working on, which is a very important vector, is really how do we start to move those boxes into what we call a smart mobility architecture. All right. You may want to shut off your phone. Yeah, so smart mobility architecture, which is really moving from these 150 boxes into centralized communication. I mean, that's a very big piece. If you ever want to understand the structure, the organization structure of an OEM, just open up a car. Each and every single one of those boxes is a team, right? There's an org behind it. So that's a big mental change, right? That, if you see a company like Tesla and you open up their vehicle, is you have a compute box, you have a centralized box that will collect information, and that helps them become more agile. They can do cycles of learning, they can program the car, they can download software. It turns the whole thing into something which is a little closer to what we think the future is going to be like.
And I would totally echo that. I think what you're seeing is the car software architecture is looking a lot more like this phone than it has traditionally with a bunch of ECUs strung together on a CAN bus. And we have an existence proof in Tesla. And I think you're seeing, and you're going to see the organization change to accommodate that kind of system stack, and then you're going to get the features of that kind of stack, like over-the-air updates and much more frequent refreshes and revisions, tighter cybersecurity around that system architecture. It's going to be a new world that is going to not just reshape the car itself, but as Ryan, you said, the organizations behind that software.
So Jim, since we are at the startup nation, eventually, there are plenty of startups here. They want to hear what you're looking for.
Yeah. So good question. So I think that if you look at the sort of the logical stack between sensors, perception, prediction, planning, and actuation, that's the way we think of things. And there's clearly a ton of innovation happening at the sensors. We think perception, there's also quite a bit of innovation. We sort of feel like that problem will be solved. The prediction layer, we're not so sure. I mean, there's, I think, a lot of innovation that has to happen there. And why is that? It comes down to theory of mind. When you're driving, you unconsciously project your expectation onto all the players in the road. So whether those two kids on the corner with the skateboard will cross against the light, you probably think, boy, if I were them and I was that age, I'd probably go against the light. Mother with a stroller, probably not. And so we play this out, all these predictions, nearly autonomously, automatically, within our own mind. We have to teach machines to do that. It's really difficult to do, and it's really difficult because we don't even think about it at all. Martin Sierhuis at Nissan has this great way of thinking about it. He says, if you go to San Francisco, pedestrians rule, right? Everybody yields for pedestrians. It's annoying as a San Franciscan. And in Amsterdam, it's bicycles. And in Tehran, it's this delicate ballet between cars and pedestrians. So it's not like you just have to learn what humans do. You have to localize that expectation as well. It's a very, very tough problem and one that desperately needs to be solved. I think the other one is on data. How do we assess data? How do we know when we have all the long tail scenarios? It's easy to solve for 1 sigma of scenarios. We're going to have to solve for 9 sigma of scenarios. 1 trillion miles are driven every year on Toyota cars. We have to, just a few incidents can really affect our brand. So the long tail matters a lot, and the tail is fat. And so we have to understand what those corner cases are, and we have to be able to capture them, train our systems against them, and then regress our existing or new systems against those cases. These are really, really hard problems to get to the first questions you asked, Eyal, which is, when are we going to have autonomy?
Okay, good. Eran, any add-ons on that? You're also
Yeah, sure.
technology-oriented guy?
Yeah, so just some background. I mean, last 6 months we've done 3 investments just in Israel alone, and I think that that's kind of representation of the different domains that we're active in. By no means any of those are solved, okay? Those are kind of cutting-edge problems that we're working with companies here. So one is, we work with Innoviz, which is a LiDAR company. It's in the perception category. Perception is extremely important for the autonomous driving, self-driving vehicle. Main reason is, if you take a look at vehicles today, a lot of them will drive very, very slowly. You get annoyed of how slowly they go. Mainly it's because they can't see, okay? They're kind of operating a little bit blind. And from our perspective, the further out the vehicle can see, the better resolution it can see. It means that we can react faster, okay? We know, when there's something happening, the vehicle can react in a way that the passenger will feel comfortable and safe, okay? We want to make sure there's a safety envelope around the vehicle we need to maintain. We need to do it at high speed in highways, and we need to ensure that everything is very well balanced when we're doing it in a dense urban environment. So sensing is a very important element of that. A second investment that we did was in Valence. Okay, Valence does high-speed communication, okay, like 6 gigabit per second. And the reason we did that, if you take a look at the internal architecture of the vehicle we just mentioned earlier, we're going to get more cameras, we're going to get more LiDARs, we're going to get more sensors. There's going to be a lot more traffic coming in. And the architecture of the vehicle is going to become a lot closer to like a server-client architecture. We're going to see high-speed communication coming in there. And the technology we have today is just not sufficient. So those are kind of the problems that we're thinking about. How do we go and increase the speed? How do we go increase the security? And again, there's a lot of opportunities in those areas. And the last one was Autonomo, which deals with the data brokerage marketplace, right? There's a lot of data that the vehicles accumulate, but how can they get monetized? How do we create a value chain around it? We think there's going to be a lot more happening in data. Frankly, it's kind of a green field, okay, for the automotive space.
Before we finish, there's another subject that I want to raise. Mark, I want your view on this. There's other, transportation is more than just vehicles. Now the technology goes into new fields, whether it's the Hyperloop or electric plane, it's all going to happen sometime in the future. How is that going to affect, all the services type of businesses, the cars or the buses or the train, etc.?
Yeah, so, again, with a little bit of a U.S. bias, I think on the rail network we have a lot of room to improve. That's true in much of the world, in China, and you see in Europe, good examples of inner-city rail that is very fast, efficient. In the States, we have a lot of room to improve. And take example, you could see maglev, or you could see some form of Hyperloop from Washington to Baltimore as an example that could entirely change the city of Baltimore to become more of a bedroom community to Washington. So this kind of thing I think will happen. We'll see some examples of this. We're already seeing a renaissance in streetcar. It might not seem fancy, but it's created a lot of transit-oriented development. We're seeing systems open up all over the country now and around the world. A lot of interest in streetcars, some new metro systems. And I think we're going to see a different bus system in the future. I think we're going to see, that's not as sexy, it's not what you're asking, but what we saw on the B2C side with all the rideshare companies has woken up the bus systems, and there needs to be a lot of change there.
Okay, guys, thank you for your time. Our time is up. Thank you very much.